Welcome to the Living While Loving Your Child Through Addiction podcast. Here, we focus on self care as we tend to our own lives while also extending love and compassion to our kids. This podcast offers science backed skills to bring hope and healing to your entire family. Today, we have a guest. Jeremy French got sober in 1995, and it was his love of making things that saved him. His fiery personality can be as coarse as the sandpaper used in the furniture he makes, but the realness and passion in which he guides his apprentices is palpable. This passion for everything he builds each day, the furniture, his family, the love of soccer, his character, and his confidence in others, makes him an exceptional mentor to those around him. Jeremy is directing his endless energy toward his grand opus of bringing those in recovery back to life and making them whole once again. I love the work you're doing. Thank you so much for making the time to be here today.
I don't think I've ever heard that read
Oh,
about
really?
me. Somebody wrote that about me, and it's weird to hear somebody else's word about you.
Well, you can tell that they thought a lot of you and your work.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. He's a good writer. That's for sure.
Yeah. So there was a little bit about this in your bio, but I want to start by hearing more about what inspired you to create Making Whole and how that journey with Making Whole has impacted you.
So we were talking a little bit before we started here about death and about losing people that are close to us. And two of the men that were in my wedding, close friends, guys that I care real deeply about, both took their lives right about the time they turned 40. And the second one was in 2015. It was a family member and close friend. And in both cases, I was left at the end of those experiences, knowing those guys pretty well, kind of understanding their situation, wondering where they could have gone to get better and what was available for them in the world when they were kind of in this dark night of the soul, um, to find some type of relief. And having been sober a good period of time at that point, I kind of had a certain awareness of what was out there. And knowing these two guys as well as I did, I knew that nothing that was out there would have helped them,
Mhm.
just based on their character and personality and what their needs were at that stage of their life and their, just who they were. And so I started wondering, what can you create a place that helps people? That's it. That actually genuinely people want to be there and want to get better. And so I started thinking a lot more um, about that time when Carl passed away, and started thinking about what does it mean for people to get better? Um, what does it actually mean? What are the metrics that we use when somebody's got addiction or mental health issues to say this is what better looks like? And so I thought back over 20 years at that point of all the people I knew who got better in a way, like the way I defined that was these are people that I would exchange lives with right now. And so I'd known a lot of people at that point, and it's a relatively short list of people and all the people I'd interfaced with in recovery, um, in the recovery community. And I started thinking about what's the common denominators in these people's lives, in their practice. And two things were true in every one of them that I could think of. One was that they all had a story about a person at the beginning. Call it a mentor, call it a sponsor, call it just a caring person. Every one of them has a story about a person. And the other thing about them is that they all had either a profession or their primary hobby, the thing that they were passionate about, that required them to solve complicated problems in their daily life. And so those two things were true with everybody. And what solving a complicated problem is, that's what I would call creativity. A lot of people hear about creativity and they think about objects and they think about making things. What creativity is for me is a process. It's an identical step-by-step process to the scientific process. The primary difference between those two processes is that creativity doesn't require proof. And so it's a perfect tool when you're walking into uncertainty, where you don't have all the information to navigate through whatever that situation is, right? So that's, to me, that's how I would define the creative process. And I would say that all of these people had something creative in that respect, where they're interfacing with a problem where the outcome's uncertain. They're passionate about it and they're trying to create something forward. And whether that was people in the world of craft, there were certainly some of those, but it was also a lot of mothers, and not just mothers in by right of giving birth, but people who are passionate about being parents. A lot of people fell into that category. CEOs, executives, people that are like right on the cutting edge of solving complicated problems. So that struck me. And then one of the things that was happening at this stage, and it had been happening throughout my professional life, is that people come along and, about once a year, somebody would come who had worked for me at some point in the past and tell me, working in your shop is what changed my life. And these are guys that like arrived at my shop without teeth, and they come back to me a decade later with PhDs. And they attribute this experience of working in a shop as being the thing that changed their life. And so that's kind of the seed that was planted that this place developed from, was this idea that there's got to be an environment that can change people, um, particularly people who are maybe not ready to change, but who are tired of suffering, which is a different group of people. I've known plenty of people who were like done, and they're just done. And you can put them in the worst situations and they get better. But there's a much larger group of people who are like, I'm not sure I'm done, but I'm tired of suffering in the way I am. And so the question is, can you create a space that impacts these people in a way, and what does that look like? And so that's what I set out to do, was create an environment where people get better. And the tools that I use are the tools of making furniture.
Yeah, that I wrote down quite a few things that you said that really spoke to me that, well, a place that actually helps and that people want to be there. I think that that's key. And that is welcoming people where they are as well. So can you explain, we skipped over what exactly making whole is.
What it is on the face is it's a furniture studio. That's it. We build furniture. And what it is some very talented furniture makers that take on apprentices and teach them how to build furniture. So that's what it is on the face. What that is a vehicle to help people learn how to live, and more specifically, how to learn how to solve complicated problems where the outcome's uncertain. So I think where any treatment needs to begin is, and I guess any problem, it's an identification of what's the problem. What is the problem that we're addressing? And if we went around and interviewed treatment centers and interviewed parents and interviewed people who aren't related to addiction and interviewed people about what's the problem with addiction, my suspicion is that there's not a lot of answers that really ring the bell, right? Most of the time, that's a conversation about the impact that substances have on people, um, which is kind of like looking at a dead tree and saying the problem is that it's rotting, right? The problem was something way before that, where um, the needs to thrive and grow weren't accessible for one reason or the other. Um, one of the things we can say about addiction is that the solution, recovery, is a dance about walking into uncertainty. And that's true for everybody. That there's no exceptions to that. Nobody has a playbook. And so the question is, for me, is regardless of where you fall on the specifics of addiction, that people that are going to be successful have to learn how to walk into uncertainty. And so that's what we're trying to teach people. And so building things, the creative process, what's nice about building furniture and making objects is that it's objective. It's not subjective. And so it's a big difference talking about my family origin. If you and I want to have a conversation about my mother, it's a complicated subject, right? Particularly when it comes to language and ideas. Like you and I could have a conversation about our parents and be talking about two completely different things using the same language because of the subjective nature of the conversation. With furniture, it's objective, something's 48 inches or it's not. And so one of the things that helps to do is it kind of takes some of the fluff off the problem that somebody's dealing with, and gives them objective language to explain what happened, right? If I cut something wrong, there's a reason for that. And it's a lot easier to divorce my shame or pity or fear from why I did something wrong when it's objectively wrong than if it's something that's subjectively complicated. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're building furniture and using that as a tool to explore like what's really going on inside of us.
Hmm. I liked what you said about walking into uncertainty because I'm always looking for how us parents are more like our kids than we realize. It's really easy to see our differences, but if we stop and really create more self awareness and we're being present with what's going on within us, I was thinking we have to get comfortable with uncertainty too. That's the biggest part of our own personal recovery from really trying to control our kids to trying to control everything that they do. Um, Creating that self awareness and just being comfortable with not knowing how things are going to turn out, but being able to be present with what's happening right now so that we don't miss out on those opportunities to connect and just be in the moment with somebody, even if it's imperfect.
Right. Yeah, and that's um we rob ourselves of the opportunity to live, when we're terrified of what's about to happen.
Hmm.
I think one of the things for whatever reason just jumped out to me. I listened to one of your podcasts earlier and I spent some time today thinking about the word recovery, which I find to be wildly insufficient for what we're talking about. Um, because I don't want to go back to any previous moment in my life. Um, and I think one of the things that it suggests is that something got fucked up along the way, and now we got to get back to before it was messed up. I think the way I see today, my experience of being in my own skin, which part of that story has to do with my relationship to drugs and my relationship to sobriety, is that I want my world to be expanding and getting bigger. I want to seize the opportunity to live. And that's really what we're aiming at. And it feels to me like if what I'm aiming at is to grow and expand into the best version of me, that feels like a different call to action than if I'm trying to recover, right? Like, oh, I'm messed up. I think that, like you said, I am a parent as well as somebody in recovery. I'm both those things. So I have the experience of being both those things. And uh, what what a rare gift to be able to have this experience where you have sex and then this creature shows up, and this creature is so much like you and so different than you in all the respects. But at the core, the human experience is the human experience, which we're animals, we show up, we have these sets of needs, and we just go find clever ways to meet those needs. The difference between me and my parents and me and my children is that when I discovered drugs, it was a solution to virtually every problem I had at that point, like a profound solution to every problem I had. My parents and my children didn't experience it that way. You know, they experienced the same physical sensations that I did, but it wasn't a solution in the same way. And they went and found their own versions, their own solutions, right? Some of which are um, degenerative in their nature and some of which are regenerative in their nature, right? So we're all doing that same thing. We're just looking to meet our needs. Um, so we're not different. And what we're trying to do is figure out what to do with this experience of life. So I think that we're on the same journey, and it looks very different at the point that we're trying to figure out how to grow into the best version of ourselves, which has never been realized yet, as opposed to recovering to a time when we were healthy and now we're not.
Hmm. So during that time when they're in your program for a year, right?
Yeah, ask them to be. It ranges quite a bit, but that's the idea.
The goal is, or I guess they set out to be in there for a year. During that time, like as they're making furniture, what else are they learning, like emotionally or about living a happy life?
Everybody's different. Everybody shows up to this place with an entirely different adaptation to life, an entirely different sets of experiences, different aptitudes, different liabilities. And so what somebody experiences here is different. Part of what we've tried to create, and I think we've done relatively successfully, is an environment that receives people as they are, that's open enough to have tools here for whatever that person is. So we have people that come here that are really talented, really good at work, really sociable. And that set of problems is totally different than somebody that's never been successful at anything, that's terrified of their own shadow. And so what we're trying to do is meet people in that place, and find out who they are and find out what they want. So I think one of the things that people confuse this place for a lot is vocational, like we're doing some sort of vocational rehab, and that people become overly intrigued by the idea that they're learning a trade. And they are, you can learn how to be a craftsman, but that's like, to me, it's the least interesting thing that's happening here. What I want everybody to leave here more proficient at than they came is asking questions about the problems that they're facing. And that's what the work allows us to do. The point of that is that people are then able to return to their profession or find a new profession or go back to school, and do things that previously they've not been successful at doing because they don't know how to navigate that experience. So we have people that show up here that become craftsmen, but we have a lot more people that go to school and are suddenly successful. They show up here and they've got a 1.3 GPA and now they've got a master's degree. And their experience of returning to college was like very achievable for them. We have people that return to whatever their profession was, CPAs, um, business people of various sorts that were just suffering because they kept running up against the same problem over and over again. And so why they're successful is not because we're necessarily teaching somebody how to do accounting here any better. Um, but what's happening here is a constant set of problems that somebody has to physically interface with, right? So this isn't a conversation about how should we do this, right? How should we be in recovery? How should we overcome our liabilities? This is a function of doing something, right? It's actively solving problems. It's actively trying something, assessing the result, determining if it's good enough or not, and then moving forward from there. And if that means returning and trying again, then that's what it means, right? And so for 8 hours a day, that's what we're doing. And the outcome of that is very different than the outcome of talking about it. So probably the easiest analogy I could give is you and I could sit here and talk about how to become physically fit, right? We could come up with a perfect plan on how to be physically fit, intellectually arrive at that. And what's going to happen after that is we're going to arrive somewhere between not doing any of what we just said and doing as much as we can, but being very limited on how to apply this intellectual understanding we have about what it is we're trying to do. But the conversation doesn't make us physically fit, right? It's the actual actions, it's the process that we're talking about. And so that's what this place is the constant action of solving problems. And so guys that come here that say, I can't do school, I don't learn that way, I don't do well in school, I don't test well, whatever. The number of guys that have come here and said that and who have now successfully graduated college is staggering. And you look at these people, they're excited about learning, they're doing really well in school. Like, what's the difference? And the difference is when you get to school and you're scared not to have an answer, a lot of times that's the end of college, right? I don't know how to ask for help. That's the end. That's the end of college, right? Everything just piles on after that. But if you've been in an environment for a year where you don't have any of the answers and it's expected of you to go find those answers, and you discover that when you do that, there's like a social reward for that. There's an internal reward for that. You get in the habit of going and finding answers. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal to not know. So like one of the aspects of this place, I've been a craftsman for a long time. The guy that runs our wood shop has been at it for, I don't know, 50 years. He apprenticed under Nakashima, who's probably one of the most renowned woodworkers in American history. The guy's been around the block. We've both been at this for a very long time, and we fail. The work that we take on here is complicated work that stretches us. And part of the reason for that is that I want guys to see me fail and watch what happens when I fail. I want guys to see Andy fail and Dallas fail and Marcus. I want them to see that. One of the things I've never met somebody who has a substance abuse issue that has a healthy relationship to failure. And so I want people to exercise that. So you come here, you fail, you learn different methods for stepping out of that failure and solving problems. And suddenly you're just a different person when you walk here. No different than if if you showed up to a gym every day for a year and lifted dumbbells, you know. You don't even have to understand what's happening to your arms when you lift dumbbells. You know, your biceps are going to get bigger. That's just a fact, right? You don't have to understand it. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to do any of that. You just got to lift the weights. And so there's an element of what we're doing that is that exercise of lifting the weight, of walking into uncertainty and understanding how to navigate that. And my gut instinct, when I think about what do I want somebody to leave here with, I think that's it. You know, if I have somebody for a year, that's a profoundly insignificant period of time for any emotional journey to take place, right? So I'm not going to have them for long, even if that sounds like a long time. And you can't impart a lot on people in that period of time. So my question is, what can I give somebody in a year? And I want to give them something that will be with them forever. And that's what we're aiming at. We're aiming at changing how they interface with uncertainty and problems.
I just related what you were saying to what I always say to parents is that being able to tolerate discomfort is a superpower.
Oh yeah.
And so that's what I just heard you describing is then they are able to take that, they learn, they get that discomfort tolerance, they're building that discomfort muscle while they're in the shop, and then they take that out into the world and use that to deal with all the discomfort that they come up against in going to school or any other problems that they have to solve.
In life, you know, like that's what the Buddha said. That's what Scott Peck's first line of his book, The Road Less Traveled, is life is difficult. You know, the Buddhist life is suffering. That's a like it. I think one of the things that the drug pandemic is uniquely American. It's not to say there's not addiction in the rest of the world, but there's something uniquely American about the way it's really consumed our society. Like something's happening, right? And when you see something that's culturally unique like that, it's either because of some sort of physical access, right? But more often than not, it's about stories. It's about cultural mythology. And we have a cultural mythology that says success in life is about feeling good all the time. That's it. You know, if you look at any of the advertising on any media platform, the point of that is you don't feel good, you do this, you feel better. It's true across everything. It's true across all media, all demographics. The goal in life is to feel better, right? So of course, like there's nothing that makes you feel better than being high, right? Nothing, right? So that's one aspect of why I think addiction is prevalent here. But it's also what you're getting at is the challenge of what do you do next? If somewhere in the back of your mind is telling you that if I don't feel good, I'm failing. If I don't feel good, it's evidence of uh, impending threat. Then how do you get on like that? But as soon as you look at life as this dance where you're going to suffer, Things are going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. We're going to feel a whole spectrum of complicated feelings. Then the assignment looks quite different at that point. So, yeah, I think because we are so maladjusted to suffering in this society, I definitely want to see guys suffer here. I want to see guys fail. I want to see guys challenged. I want to see guys like really banging their head against the wall to try to solve a problem so that they discover that it's okay, right? It's one of the books. I don't have a lot of books here, but one of them I have is the monster at the end of the book, the Grover book from Sesame Street. It's a classic. Anybody hadn't read it, it's the best children's book ever. Where basically the whole book, Grover's trying to keep you from turning the page because he's been told there's a monster at the end of the book. And you keep turning the pages and he freaks out. He's bugging out. The whole book is him in basically like a panic attack. And at the end, he's the monster. And he discovers, oh, like this isn't so bad after all. I just want to skip those pages and say, okay, now like this is what suffering looks like. And you know, you can either have that cripple you, or you can realize like, oh, I've got the agency to walk through this and not have it like paralyze me. If that's true, what else can I do? You know?
Yeah. It is very empowering to know you can make it through anything. I mean, when we were talking about grief before we started recording, that's one of the reasons that I think that I'm doing well at this point is that I'm like, I can handle anything. And it feels good to know that, I went through the suffering and there's going to be more suffering and I'm going to be fine. I can grocery shop while I'm suffering. I can work while I'm suffering. I can do whatever I need to do to keep moving forward. And then at some point, there's going to be some relief from the suffering, but I don't have to be actively freaking out or seeking it, or I'm just with it. And that to me is you can get through anything if you can just be with these uncomfortable feelings. If you can tolerate discomfort and suffering, you can tolerate any emotion.
Right. And two, what happens is the face of suffering changes when you become less afraid of it. So I've death has been a big part of the story that I've experienced since being in recovery. And some of the most profound, impactful experiences I've had are connected to death. At moments where like I'm stretched beyond my capacity, right? I'm fully stretched. When I look back at those moments where I was really kind of overwhelmed by grief and sadness and anger and demands on my time and all the things that came with that, and reflecting on that, those are some of the most like robust, profound, emotionally complex experiences in my life that completely shaped how I exist today. One thing it did is it helps enforce the idea that I'm here on a gift, right? I don't get to do this forever. Like this is a brief gift that I have. And life looks real different when it's being treated as a gift that's temporary than when it's being treated as a sentence that sucks?
Yeah. Well, and so I want to make sure we get to talk about the lunches that you do there daily, that you cook together and you eat together, and what the purpose of that, what that provides for everybody in the shop.
So what I did before I started making whole, there was a period of time where I went and worked for a company, basically teaching people around the world how to build things out of concrete. That was what my studio was prior to working for this company. And so it afforded me the chance to travel all around the world, which was just like profound for me. And so one of the places I spent a bit of time was Europe. And every time I went to Europe, when I would return home, there was a part of me that felt like I was leaving home. And I spent a lot of time like, what is that? What is it about this place? And it was different countries, and I always had this feeling. And one of the things that I took away from that was how the relationship to food and time is different there. How people actually value eating. It's much harder in the places I was at least to find bad food, right? I can throw a stone and find bad food anywhere I go in this country, right? It was tough to find because people expect good food, simple pleasure. They take their time to eat. They're not like eating in a rush. And it highlights for me like uh, the things that make life really interesting are simple things. And one of them is just eating and sharing company with people. Like you think about some of the richest times in my life have been happened around the dining table. Um, just taking time to eat. And so I want to make space for that. So every day a guy is given the credit card and he goes to the grocery store and buys whatever he wants to cook and cooks for us. One of the strange things is that I've opened an invitation. I'll continue to open an invitation that anybody that wants to show up for lunch. We eat at 12:30, Monday through Friday, and all people have to do is bring their appetite. And so on any given day, people will just show up out of the blue, unannounced. And so they're cooking for us, but also for whoever happens to show up any given time. And there's some really interesting people come eat lunch with us. And now it's just a casual conversation. Yesterday, there was a guy here who's a really successful entrepreneur and lawyer, and he came and ate with us, and just like one of the guys. And there's an experience of like sitting down and eating with people, um, casually, good food that changes your experience of a day. So we do that every day.
Yeah, and the connection that comes with that. And I live next door to my mom and I live with my sister. And because there's several of us in one place, the rest of the family tends to come here for holidays and stuff. And the meals that we've had together and the memories that that's made, and just even when it's just my mom and stepfather and sister and her wife, like all of us together, it's been that's just been a huge part of my healing, is having that community with my family and that connection, and knowing that I have that to look forward to. It's just like, if we haven't eaten together in a few days, one of us is talking about needing to do that because we miss it.
Right. And it sounds so like cliche and simple, but what you're talking about, like, I don't know that it gets more important than a meal. You know, not to say that's the most important thing, but it's pretty important. And that's in building this place, it's those really simple things that I'm aiming at, right? And so that's one of the reasons why guys who come here, not everybody that comes here wants to be here. Though everybody that comes here says they want to be here. They find out maybe that they don't, but most of the people who've been through here want to be here. And that's like when you ask them why, I don't know that they give, they'll give you various answers. But I think part of what it is like we do simple things well, or it's not a stressful environment because of any type of drama, even though there is a level of expectation. We're doing like very nice work here. We don't do, we're serving the very top of the market with the furniture we build, because that's what's interesting to me and the other makers who are here. We're not interested in doing um, things that aren't important. And these guys see that. So it's a funny, like that's one of the paradoxes. It's not stressful at all because the people are easy people to be around. But the work has a high level expectation. And I would say that's kind of a paradox that captures a lot of what happens here, right? So we have a meal. It's uh, something we do every day, but it's not formal. Some days it's really good. Some days it's just edible. Um, but it's always a meal and it's always been freshly cooked and somebody had a license to go and make something, create something.
Yeah. So this went by really fast, but I want to make sure that we get this one question in, because I feel like families are often left out. And how do you involve families in the process there?
I mean, it's funny because most of these questions, what I want to do is just round up people who've had the experience of this place and not have me toting that. You found out about us through a mother that reached
Yeah,
out to
yeah.
you.
So yeah, you came highly recommended, which then got me doing the research and listening to you on other podcasts. And I was like, oh, I've really got to share this because this is different, and we need different.
Um, uh, I was trying to explain this to a parent the other day. She's like, what do I get? What are we getting out of this? Um, and there's an instinct to like make this sort of bullet points about all the things that are going to happen. And every treatment center has one of those. These are the therapies you're going to get. This is I find most of those things tedious and inauthentic. The things that you're going to get out of treatment. I find them to be unimportant, right? So, like we're just talking about a meal, like it would seem ridiculous for me to say, here are three highlights of making whole. One of them is that you get to eat every day. It sounds like, oh, how does this add up, right? But as we're talking about this and talking about the impact of food, it's really important. So, in considering the situation with parents, the reason I'm doing this um, is because I have a problem that I'm trying to solve. And that problem is, how do I create a place that gets people better? The reason I chose to do this professionally is one of the things I learned about myself in probably my early 40s is that if my professional work does not challenge me, if it doesn't stretch me, then my brain does this thing where it consumes itself. It's like I have these wolves in my brain that need food, right? And the only thing they like to eat is problems, complicated problems. And if it doesn't have that, it just eats itself. And so that's what I discover about myself as a professional. Like I need problems that stretch me and give me all sorts of places to explore. And I kind of got to a point in my professional life where the problems I was solving weren't that complicated for me. And so part of the reason I'm doing this is that one of the needs I have as a professional is to have really interesting and challenging problems. So that's why I'm here, is to solve these complicated problems. And so when a person arrives to me, I'm curious to know how they get better. That's what I'm most curious about more than anything. I can make the work that we make, most of which, even the complicated stuff, I can do it kind of on autopilot because I've been doing it a really long time. But when people show up, I can't. It's more complicated. That's what's most interesting. That's what has me the most curious as a professional. And so, more than saying, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z with a parent, I'm interested in solving the problem. And the family's part of that conversation, right? And so I will engage with the family to the extent that they're curious to engage with me. And I'm going to be truthful with them. And I'm going to talk to them about their story, right? And try to help them develop a perspective about the nature of the problem that their family is dealing with in a way that brings about sustainable, healthy solutions, that brings about growth. And that's complicated to do as a parent. I am a parent as well. So I told you this earlier. I'll share it right now. When my son was born, I had this reoccurring dream for the first 2 years he was alive, like sometimes every night, that he drowns and dies in front of me. Not once in all the times I had this dream did I save this kid. So, being a good parent, young parent, the first thing we do is teach our kid how to swim, right? 3 years old, throw his ass in the pool at the YMCA and let him do the thing that we've all seen videos of. But also as a parent, like this dream is not about swimming. This is about the power of drowning and the power of water and the fact that water is not something you negotiate with, right? It's not like terrorists came and got my kids and there's this opportunity to negotiate or there's a bad guy or there's any of that. Water just takes you and that's the end of it, right? And there's nothing I can do to stop that from happening. Um, so it really forced me to think about what it meant to be a parent, what it means to be human, what the contract is I have, the sort of spiritual contract I have as a father to my children. And I'm still curious about that. My son is 18, my daughter is 20. I'm still curious about being a parent, what that means. And so I think a lot of times I end up talking to families. I'm just curious about people and who they are and what their experience is. And I think that's what comes out. So it's not like counseling. We're not going to do anything formal. But I've spent hours and hours and hours on the phone with just a single parent, and mostly because I'm curious, mostly because I'm interested in solving these problems that I'm faced with, and not for any other motivation, frankly.
Hmm. I can see the value in just your curiosity with them and that opening them up to being more curious because what was really important to me in this was redefining what
Right.
parenting meant to me
Right.
and deconditioning, like, I'm still shedding layers of conditioning that doesn't serve me, these things that I believe that I never even really thought about. So it, it's taken a whole new belief system many times. When my daughter started struggling with substance use, I needed a whole new belief system to get me through that. When she passed away, I needed to build on that belief system because what got me to there wasn't going to get me forward. So I think that just that curiousness and the curious approach that you are bringing to this process and not bringing any no judgment. There's just so much judgment involved in substance use and recovery. I mean, it's just refreshing to see your approach. I wish we had more time to talk about this. If my internet hadn't gone out, we would have had a little more time, but um
Well, I could carry on talking about this forever, so you're gonna have to cut me off.
well, so if anybody is interested in finding out more about making whole, they can go to your website. I'll put
Yep.
that in the show notes. And that's where they can find out about getting in touch with you to find more out about your program if they're interested in it. And is there anything that we didn't cover that is important to you to say before we end?
Uh, no, thanks for the opportunity. I always enjoy speaking about this and learning about myself in that process. There's a couple interesting articles about us. There's various podcasts that I've done in the past that people can find out about. I think we show work at a place called Cohab Space in High Point, North Carolina. So if anybody that's listening to this is in the design trade, they can see our work there. But the biggest invitation that I give to anybody is to come visit with us. Our studios in Asheville, North Carolina. Like I said, we do lunch at 12:30 every day. And there is quite literally an open invitation to anybody that wants to come and just see what the place is about and eat with us or just hang out and be in the space. It's a beautiful space.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.